The day my own daughter called me a kidnapper, I was standing in the courthouse hallway with my grandson's sticky little hand wrapped around my finger. He was 5 years old. He was wearing the blue dinosaur sweatshirt I bought him at Target. He was asking if we could get chicken nuggets after the meeting with the grown-ups. And his mother, the girl I had once rocked to sleep in the same arms holding him now, was standing 10 feet away in heels that were too high for that floor, telling her lawyer I had stolen her child and turned him against her. If you've never felt your heart split straight down the middle, try standing between your baby and your baby's baby while a judge talks about reunification plans like you're all pieces on a game board. Before I tell you how I ended up raising my grandson like my own son, and how the same court that gave him to me almost took him away, do me one small favor. If you like having long, honest family stories playing while you cook, fold laundry, or try to fall asleep, tap the like button and subscribe so YouTube knows to bring you back to Aunt Ruby's voice every week. There's always an extra chair at this kitchen table. Now, let me tell you how I gave my heart to a little boy twice, and only got to keep part of it. My name is Carol. I'm 69 years old, I live in a small town in Indiana, and if you look at my family on paper, it sounds simple. 3 kids, 1 grandson, no husband. My ex left when the kids were teenagers, and we made our own family out of what was left. But paper doesn't show all the cracks. My middle child, my daughter Amanda, was born stubborn. She came into this world screaming like she was already mad at it, and she stayed that way for most of her 20s. She was bright, funny, beautiful. She was also drawn to trouble like a moth to a porch light. First, it was the boyfriend who thought dealing weed out of my garage was no big deal. Then it was the pills she stole from a friend's grandmother's bathroom cabinet. Then it was the car that went missing and came back with a broken taillight and a different license plate. I thought it was just a phase. Everybody drinks too much in their 20s, I told myself. Everybody makes mistakes. But phases usually end. Addiction doesn't. By the time Amanda was 28, partying had turned into using, and using had turned into can't get out of bed without something. I saw it in the way her eyes would glaze over at family dinners, in the way she showed up late to everything, or not at all, in the strange excuses, the missing money, the broken promises. When she told me she was pregnant, my first reaction was joy and pure grandmother-level excitement. Then, a second later, terror. Are you clean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice soft. She rolled her eyes. "God, Mom, yes," she said. "I've cut way back." Cut way back is not the same as clean. But the doctor visits came and went, the baby grew, and by some small miracle, my grandson arrived screaming and healthy. We named him Eli. The first time I held him, his tiny fingers curled around mine like they were made to fit there. I remember thinking, I will burn the world down before I let anything bad happen to you. I didn't realize how quickly that promise would be tested. Dash. For a while, Amanda tried. I'll give her that. She went to meetings, she got a sponsor, she went on shaky little stretches of sobriety that felt like walking on thin ice. Every step, a maybe. But addiction has long arms. By the time Eli was 3, there were more slips than sober stretches. He'd show up at my house on a Tuesday with Amanda, and she'd say, "Can you keep him overnight, Mom? I'm not feeling great." "Of course," I'd say. One night turned into 3, 3 turned into a week. Then he'd go back to her little apartment for a while, and I'd spend the whole time staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. You learn to read your grandchildren in ways you never wanted to. Eli would come back with dark circles under his eyes. Sometimes he smelled like stale smoke and takeout. Sometimes he'd be wired and jittery, talking a mile a minute because Mommy's friend gave me soda. I bought extra pajamas, extra toothbrushes, extra everything. It's just in case, I told myself. In case came one February night when the police knocked on my door at 2 a.m. "Ma'am, are you Eli Carter's grandmother?" the officer asked. My heart stopped. I pictured a crash, a crime scene, a sheet over a tiny body. "Yes," I croaked. He shifted, uncomfortable. He's okay, he rushed to say. He's with a social worker right now. Your daughter was found unconscious in a car outside a bar. There were substances involved. The boy was in the back seat. Child Services needs a safe relative placement tonight. Can you take him? I almost laughed. Could I take him? I'd been waiting 3 years for someone to ask me that question. Yes, I said. Bring him home. They did. Eli arrived in an oversized sweatshirt, carrying a plastic grocery bag that held 2 mismatched socks, a toy car, and a sippy cup that smelled like old milk. His hair was tangled, his eyes huge. "Hi, Grandma," he whispered, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be happy to see me. I got down on my knees and opened my arms. "Hi, baby," I said. "You're safe. You're home." Behind him, the social worker handed me a folder. "Emergency kinship placement," she said. "Sign here. We'll schedule a hearing within 72 hours. For now, he stays with you." The forms were blurry through my tears, but I read enough to understand. I wasn't just babysitting this time. The state of Indiana was giving me temporary custody of my grandson. I signed, my hand shaking. Somewhere in the city, my daughter was being taken to a cell or a hospital bed. Somewhere in that mess, she was still my baby. But the boy in front of me needed a bath, a bed, and breakfast in the morning. So I tucked him into the little twin bed in my spare room, kissed his forehead, and whispered the same thing I'd said when I held him at the hospital. "I will burn the world down before I let anything bad happen to you." Temporary custody turned into something that looked a lot like raising a child all over again. When you're almost 70, preschool feels different than it did in your 30s. Mornings were cereal, cartoons, and the hunt for one tiny shoe. Afternoons were speech therapy, nap battles, and learning which playground had the least terrifying climbing structures. Evenings were chicken nuggets, dishwater, and falling asleep in my chair halfway through the weather report. My body ached, my heart was full. We developed routines. Eli loved dinosaurs and peanut butter and stories about when his mom was a little girl. He called me Grandma Mom for a while because I was both in his mind. We did video calls with my other 2 kids, who cheered him on when he learned to write his name. We put his drawings on the fridge and his muddy shoes by the door. The social worker came every month, checking boxes on her tablet. "How's he doing in your care?" she'd ask. I'd point to his growth chart on the wall, the stack of library books, the preschool progress reports. "He's thriving," she'd say, almost surprised. Sometimes she'd talk about Amanda. "She's got an opportunity to go to rehab," she'd say. "If she completes a program and stays clean, the goal is reunification." Reunification. That's the word the system loves. It's a beautiful word in theory. Families back together, children and parents reconnected. In practice, it feels less like a warm hug and more like a deadline ticking towards a day you hope never come and know might be the right thing anyway. I wanted my daughter to get well. Of course I did. I did not trust the version of her that had left my grandson in a freezing car. Those 2 truths clawed at each other in my chest. Amanda called from rehab after 3 months. Her voice sounded clearer than it had in years. "Mom," she said, crying, "I'm so sorry. I'm going to fix this. I'm getting better. I want my son back." I cried too. "I'm proud of you for getting help," I said. "Eli's okay. He loves you. We talk about you every day." We started with supervised phone calls. At first, she'd forget. Then she didn't. She sent letters with little drawings on the envelope, saying things like, "Tell Eli Mommy is working hard so she can be the mom he deserves." I saved every one. The social worker beamed. "This is what we want," she said. "A mom in recovery, a safe grandma, a child who knows he's loved by both. This is the best case scenario." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did. Another part remembered all the times Amanda had gotten better before. The job she kept for 6 months, the boyfriend who was different this time, the New Year's resolution about no more pills, seriously, I'm done. Recovery is not a straight line. It's a scribble. But the court has its own timeline. 2 years into raising Eli, we had what they call a permanency hearing. That's where they decide if a child is going back to a parent, staying where they are, or going into adoption. I wore my nicest blouse and clutched Eli's little Batman backpack like a shield. Amanda walked in on the arm of a man in a suit. "My attorney," she said, her eyes flicking over me like I was a stranger on the bus. She looked good, sober. Her hair was brushed, her cheeks had color, her hands weren't shaking. For a moment, my heart leapt. That's my girl, I thought. Then the lawyer started talking. He painted a picture of a devoted young mother who had struggled with a temporary illness and done the hard work to reclaim her life. He talked about how I had refused to bring Eli for certain visits when he had a fever, how I had been reluctant to hand him over for unsupervised time when Amanda was newly out of rehab. He did not mention the nights I'd sat on the bathroom floor with Eli when he had a stomach bug. He did not mention the way he'd wake up screaming from nightmares, begging me not to let the bad man drive again. Ms. Carter believes her mother has turned her son against her, the lawyer said. She believes her mother has overstepped the role of a temporary caregiver and is now trying to interfere with reunification. My head spun. Interfere? I had dropped everything in my life to keep that child out of foster care. I had used my retirement savings to buy him clothes, pay for preschool, fix the leaky roof over his head. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "do you support the goal of reunification?" I opened my mouth and felt every word catch on my tongue like barbed wire. If I said no, I knew what it would sound like. Bitter, controlling, like every story they tell about grandparents who can't let go. If I said yes, it felt like I was signing my grandson's future away. I said carefully, "I support my daughter's recovery. I support Eli having a relationship with her mother. I don't support rushing him into a situation that isn't stable." The lawyer pounced. "So you do oppose reunification," he said. "You think you know better than trained professionals." "I think I know my grandson," I snapped. "I think I know the difference between a few months of sobriety and a foundation you can build a child's life on." The judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "the law is clear. If a parent has completed treatment and is able to provide safe housing and appropriate care, the court must prioritize reunification. You may disagree, but if you actively sabotage that process, your own placement could be reconsidered." Reconsidered. That was a nice word for "we can take him from you." For the first time since Eli arrived in my arms, I realized the state hadn't just handed him to me. They'd put us both on a leash. Things got tense after that. Eli started doing overnights at Amanda's new apartment. It was small but tidy. She had a chore chart on the fridge, she had a job at a diner, and a chip on her shoulder the size of Texas. "Don't look at me like I'm going to screw up," she snapped one afternoon when I came to drop him off. "Then don't," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flashed. "You love him more than you ever loved me," she said. I whispered. "It is to me," she shot back. "You were always criticizing me. You never trusted me. Now you finally have the perfect little boy you always wanted, and you don't want to give him back." The words hit like stones. "I took him so he wouldn't go to strangers," I said. "I did what any mother would do if her child was in no condition to parent." "Or maybe you did what you always wanted," she sneered. "Erase me and fix your mistakes with him." She slammed the door. Eli came back from those weekends quiet and clingy. He'd crawl into my lap and bury his face in my shoulder. "Did you have fun with Mommy?" I'd ask, keeping my voice light. He'd nod without looking up. Sometimes he'd say, "Mommy cried a lot," or "Mommy had a friend over, I had to sleep on the couch." I wrote everything down in a little notebook, dates and comments and behaviors. The social worker called it documentation. The mother in me called it ammunition I prayed I'd never have to use. The day Amanda called me a kidnapper was the day the court scheduled the final custody hearing. By then, Eli had lived primarily with me for almost 4 years. We were a unit. Our routines were our glue. He knew which step on the porch creaked, which cupboard held the cookies, which neighbor would sneak him extra Halloween candy. He also knew his mother better now. He knew her good days, movies and pizza and silly dancing in the living room. He knew her bad days, slammed doors, too loud voices, the smell in the apartment that made his nose wrinkle. Children don't have the words relapse or withdrawal. They just have "mommy's asleep a lot" and "mommy forgot to pick me up." 3 weeks before the hearing, Amanda tested positive for something on a random screen. The social worker called it a setback. "It happens," she said. "Recovery isn't perfect. We're still recommending reunification with a transition plan." "A setback is when you forget to buy milk," I said tightly. "A relapse is when you start using again with a 5-year-old in the next room." She sighed. "I understand your concern," she said, "but the court looks at overall progress. Mom has engaged consistently with services. The law says we must make every reasonable effort to reunite children with their parents." "What about every reasonable effort to keep them alive?" I snapped. "Mrs. Walker," she said, "if the court believes you are undermining reunification, they can change placement. I don't want that to happen. You need to be seen as supportive." Supportive. So I showed up to every meeting. I sat in every circle. I said all the right sentences through gritted teeth. Yes, I support my daughter's recovery. Yes, Eli loves his mother. Yes, we want what's best for him. All while my stomach knotted and my notebook of setbacks grew thicker. By the time we reached that courthouse hallway, I felt like I was walking a tightrope with no net. Eli squeezed my hand. "Grandma," he whispered, "who am I going to live with after this meeting?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know yet, baby," I said honestly. "But I promise you this, wherever you are, I will always, always love you." Behind us, Amanda's lawyer's voice rose. "She's manipulating him," he hissed. "She's poisoning him against his mother. It's parental alienation. Frankly, it's kidnapping with extra steps." Kidnapping. The word hung in the air like smoke. Amanda didn't correct him. She just stared at me, eyes burning, like this was all my fault. My knees trembled. For a second, I thought I might faint. But then Eli's fingers tightened around mine, and I straightened. I had not kidnapped that child. I had answered the door when the state knocked in the middle of the night with a scared little boy. Sometimes the system gets its labels exactly backwards. In the hearing, I told the truth. Not the polished version, not the version that made anyone look good. I talked about Amanda's progress and her efforts. I also talked about the relapse, the crying, the forgotten pickups, the new friend who moved in and left beer cans on the coffee table. I read from my notebook. Eli's nightmares after certain weekends, his regression with bedwetting, the way he clung to my leg and begged not to go on days when his mommy seemed too sleepy. Amanda's lawyer objected so many times, the judge finally held up his hand and said, "Let her finish." When it was Amanda's turn, she cried. She said I'd never believed in her. She said I was trying to steal her child to redo motherhood. She said every time she looked at me, she heard my voice from years ago saying, "What's wrong with you?" when she brought home bad grades. Some of that was true. I had said those words. Not in those exact moments, maybe, but in those years, in that tone. Sometimes your children load every mistake you ever made into the gun they point back at you. The judge listened. He rubbed his forehead. He looked tired, like he'd seen this movie too many times. "The court's priority is the best interest of the child," he said, "and the law is clear that, when possible, a child should be raised by their parent. However, the court cannot ignore concerns about stability and sobriety." My heart slammed against my ribs. He took a breath. "Here is my decision," he said. "Legal custody will remain with the mother, Amanda Carter, continued participation in treatment and random testing. Physical placement will transition over 6 months, starting with extended weekends, then weeks, then full-time if all conditions are met. Mrs. Walker will have guaranteed visitation and remains an important caregiver in this child's life." It was like being told they weren't cutting off your arm today, just cutting it halfway, slowly, over time. On paper, it was a compromise. In my chest, it was a countdown. Those 6 months were some of the hardest of my life. Eli spent more and more time at Amanda's. I spent more and more time staring at my phone. He'd pull me from her couch, whispering into the speaker. "Grandma, when am I coming back to your house?" "This weekend, baby," I'd say, keeping my voice steady. "We'll make pancakes." I tried not to ask leading questions. The court didn't like leading questions. But I listened. I listened to background noise, to the slur in Amanda's voice some nights, to the silence on others. One Friday, she was supposed to pick him up from my house at 5 p.m. 6 came, 7. At 8, my phone rang. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she slurred. "My ride fell through. Can you just bring him? I'm fine." I closed my eyes. I could hear a man laughing in the background. Eli sat on the couch next to me, clutching his backpack. "Put Eli on the phone," I said. He came on, small and hopeful. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, love," I said. "How about you stay with me tonight, and we'll figure it out tomorrow." He sighed with relief, so loud, it hurt. The next morning, I called the social worker. I told her everything. The missed pickups, the slurred words, the setbacks that were starting to look like a pattern, not an accident. 3 weeks later, after another dirty screen and one incident where the police were called to Amanda's apartment for a disturbance, the court reversed its decision. Eli's primary placement returned to me. Amanda was given supervised visitation at a center with bright posters and bolted-down toys. She looked at me that first day through the glass and mouthed, "Are you happy now?" I shook her head, tears streaming. "No," I mouthed back. "I'm heartbroken." Because here's the truth no one tells you about winning custody of your grandchild. There are no winners. A little boy still doesn't get to fall asleep in the same house every night with 2 parents who tuck him in. A mother still has to sign in to see her own child. A grandmother still pays a price in guilt, even when she did the right thing. Eli is 8 now. He lives with me full time. He sees his mom at visits when she shows up. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. When she's sober, she's wonderful with him. When she's not, she disappears. He's old enough now to know more than I wish he did. "Is Mommy sick again?" he'll ask when she misses a visit. "Yes," I'll say. "She's fighting something very big and very hard, but she loves you." "Do you love her?" he asked me once, out of nowhere. I thought about the girl in the pink tutu who insisted on wearing cowboy boots to kindergarten, the teenager who slammed doors and wrote bad poetry, the woman in handcuffs sobbing as they let her out of the car that night. "I do," I said. "I don't always like what she does, but I love her." He nodded like that made sense. "Sometimes I'm mad at her," he said, quietly, "but I still love her too." "That's okay," I said. "Hearts can hold more than one feeling at a time." So can courtrooms. So can grandmothers. If you've made it this far, maybe you're a grandparent in a similar storm. Maybe your child has disappeared into addiction, mental illness, or something else that stole them away. Maybe you're the one getting the 2 a.m. call from the police, the social worker, the school. Maybe you're standing in that awful courthouse hallway trying to decide whether to fight harder or let go. Here's what I've learned sitting at the crossroads of mother and grandmother, law and love. First, taking custody of your grandchild does not make you a kidnapper. It makes you a bridge between what should have been and what has to be. Don't let anyone shame you for answering the knock at your door. Second, supporting reunification does not mean ignoring red flags. You are allowed to cheer for your child's recovery and still say, "not yet," when it comes to unsupervised visits or overnights. Third, the court speaks in words like best interest, permanency plan, and reunification. Your heart speaks in bedtime stories, scraped knees, and the way a child's hand fits in yours. You have to learn to translate between the two without losing your mind. Fourth, documentation is not betrayal. Writing down what you see is not building a case against your child. It's protecting a child who can't testify about their own nightmares. And finally, you can love your child and still choose your grandchild's safety over your child's feelings. That's the hardest one. It feels like choosing one baby over another. But when the judge, the lawyer, the social worker go home at the end of the day, you are the one who has to look into a 5-year-old's eyes when he asks, "Am I safe?" If the answer in that moment means your grown child is angry with you, calls you a kidnapper, cuts you off for a while, that's a grief you can live with. The other kind, the one where you stayed quiet and something terrible happened because you didn't want to rock the boat, that's the kind that keeps people awake for the rest of their lives. So, if you're standing where I stood, with your heart in one hand and your grandchild's in the other, I can't tell you what the law will do, but I can tell you this. Choose the child who still sleeps with a stuffed animal. Choose the one who can't hire a lawyer. Choose the one whose only question is, who's taking care of me? You can keep loving your grown child. You can keep hoping, praying, showing up when it's safe. But when the moment comes and you have to pick a child, pick the side with the smallest shoes by the door.